But you were up in the second row with us before.
I was, yeah.
Okay.
You want me to sit up there with you now? I can do that.
Can I make you move? And I'm going to move up here?
Leave her.
You do not want me to try to do that. I do know there are people who could do that. Because I'm standing.
Because there's...
Oh, yeah.
Wendy's John. This side.
Method to our madness here. Flowers are very, very, very pretty. Yeah, that's we get Jeff back and maybe Claire back.
I felt the same way, and then I was like, oh, no, that's right. This weekend is impossible to keep track.
I watched the Fire concert last year from the comfort of my home. You did? Yeah. I just thought, I am not going to help. So, I don't know what song it was, but there's a little Linda Jr. chorus. And right in the middle of the song, he goes, and then he goes,
What's your basic
where are the camera? You know, your mom's on the phone. I told him to take it off. I told him. Oh, those junior ones have got to be maybe 6 feet. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So
They're young.
this is enough, huh?
Yeah, it's 2 nights of it, and it was a long concert. It's a lot of music. They did as far as Requiem, almost the whole thing. They did the road line at the end. It's several other pieces. And then twice during that, both organs stop working. They stop the thing, turn them back on, and do that. Yeah.
I did this. Well, and listen. runs under. I don't know.
What's what airline?
I thought she was on.
Oh, she's on Southwest or something.
No, I think she's on there. She changed. She was on the carrier.
And it's South America, she probably took the
Oh well, then she didn't.
Next slide.
Yeah, that was probably United if the connection in Chicago.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Delta goes through Minneapolis.
Right.
Yeah. And that's terrible too.
Oh, gosh. It's a great area.
And dear,
Fun to shop.
well, if you don't get along, we had up on.
Yeah. It's big.
Way across. I never would have made it.
I was never unhappy if there was a lot of people in this place.
Oh, I know. This guy, and then he got to jail, and then they changed the game. And then he had to turn around and take his 48 that guy. I had no idea.
Thank goodness for those memories.
I know.
I wouldn't be surprised if she runs in the next one. I would not be surprised. He's over the afternoon today. I can't for the life of me remember where he's going. Texas and Florida and Kentucky and just in the last
Right. Yeah.
month.
Yeah. Oh, that would be fun. But you'd have to, yeah, right. No, well, actually, Dale just came back driving like
Right.
18 hours to Florida. You know, she was tired, but we'll have to take leave for a trip. Right, sometimes. Maybe next fall.
Or where he's going. It's just a complete mystery to me right now.
That's because we had too many Sundays.
Too many
Oh, Rick,
Sundays, and he's been
Stephen.
too many places. And,
Right.
Right. We've lost track. It's the company.
Oh, I don't know.
Essentially a consultant. He's going to go on and
I
talk to
don't,
us.
yeah, I don't, yeah, right. I'll have to.
Oh.
I have
Southern
to
chap?
yeah.
The Southern chap.
Facebook.
That was
But he changes galleries, but he's been in
He's
the
going to
gallery.
Atlanta?
And then he does galleries all over the United States, given,
That's sort of like you should do your
their invitation.
no matter what they told
Where are you going today?
Right. Well, he has a permanent gallery in
See, I see this Southern chap here. What time is your flight?
the various galleries.
What time is your flight?
Shows consistently in Chicago.
4:30? Oh, something like that. 3:40, 4:30. They're very similar times.
I don't know.
It just goes through and we get to Sundays.
It's too bad it's Grand Rapids Airport. I think he could take me if there were a United Club. He could take me to gas.
Eating tacos.
Give a little bit of
Did you go on the
some
water?
perks.
Go out and
She's
get
In the water?
yeah.
Or you don't have any water, don't you? Yeah, there's no water there. It's like internal.
it's flown more than 1,000,000 miles. Yeah, so they give them.
Yeah,
You get a
right.
flat.
It's clogging the drain. Right. They're
an
right.
airline. I like these jobs. I like that. I told him I think
She's happy there. Group of friends. Yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah, oh really? She's like, yeah, right, right.
and then they had these that's where you go down there. I had to I go up anything.
Right, right, exactly.
Then so they put me in the street stop. Because he had the permission to use it. I was me all in his street until I go down
But except for the fact that you have to alert to the message, you just turn around and like that.
Right.
Good morning. Welcome. I told you last week that every week I'm so excited to welcome you that I forget to introduce myself. So why don't I start there? I am Reverend Christopher Rowe. I use he, him pronouns, and I have the privilege and the honor of serving in this community in this season as the acting senior minister. And on behalf of everyone who calls this wonderful Cathedral of Love and Temple of Peace their spiritual home, please allow me to welcome you this morning to this special service. We have a big service planned for you this morning. We have a special guest, Reverend Beth Burkholtz. Welcome from Samaritas. Samaritas is an organization and a collective impact ministry that we have also aligned ourselves with in a few ways, and you're going to be hearing about those ways throughout this service. So thank you, Beth, for bringing your message to us. We also have John Willett reading for us today. Thank you, John. You've noticed that we've got Jonathan Took back with us on organ. I'm always excited when you're here, so thank you. We also have a very special guest, Sharon Wu, with us this morning on piano. Sharon, as I mentioned last week, was the choir's accompanist, and she did a beautiful recital here on Friday night. I couldn't be here. I had to do a wedding, but yesterday as I got ready for a memorial service, I got to watch it on YouTube, and I was telling her that it just made me even more excited for your gift of music this morning, so thank you. Also, we have the choir with us, who is sounding wonderful as always. Thank you, Austin and Margie, for that. As you can tell, there are many people bringing many gifts into this hour of worship for all of us to enjoy and share in. Thank you to everyone for doing that. Some of you are joining us from home on the live stream, or you're joining us a few days or months from now, so welcome to you as well. And I want to reiterate, as I do every week, that no matter who you are, no matter where you are on your journey of life and faith, whether you believe in one God or many gods or no gods at all, or you don't even know what you believe, no matter who you love or who you are loved by, whether this is your very first time with us, and welcome if it is, or this is your community of a lifetime or somewhere in between, whoever you are, each and every one of you has a place here. And you belong here in this community where love and justice and peacemaking are a part of our shared liberating faith. Welcome. As we begin our time of worship together, I would like us to open our hearts to worship with this call to worship, which comes to us from Wendell Berry's poem, The Peace of the Wild Things. I think that's a fitting tribute to this time we share. Please join me as we call our hearts to worship. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Welcome to this place of grace and rest.
Let the calmness carry Good morning. My name is John Willett. I use he, him pronouns, and I'll be reading today's ancient and contemporary witnesses. Our ancient witness comes to us in the form of tableau of sacred texts on loving our neighbors. Hear what the ancient spirit is saying to our contemporary ears this morning. From Buddhism, for a state that is not pleasant or delightful to me must also be to him, and a state that is not pleasing or delightful to me, how could I inflict that upon another? From Christianity, whatever you wish that men would do to you, do so to them. From Islam, not one of you is a believer until he loves his brother what he loves for himself. From Confucianism, try your best to treat others as you would wish to be treated yourself, and you will find that this is the shortest way to benevolence. From Hinduism, one should not behave towards others in a way which is disagreeable to oneself. This is the essence of morality. All other activities are due to selfish desires. And from Judaism and Christianity, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Whenever I speak or read here at church, I always get a little bit of nervous energy. It's, you don't want to make a mistake and you have that big audience, and I think that piece of music just sort of washed that away. Thank you very much. Our contemporary witness this morning comes to us from the American writer, social activist, and cultural critic, Wendell Berry. Hear what the spirit of his words is saying to us this morning. If we are looking for insurance against want and depression, we will find it only in our neighbor's prosperity and goodwill, and beyond that, in the good health of our worldly places, our homelands. If we were sincerely looking for a place of safety, for real security and success, then we would begin to turn to our communities, and not communities simply of our human neighbors, but also of the water, earth, and air, the plants and animals, all the creatures with which whom our local life is shared.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning, to Reverend Christopher and to all of you. I haven't had the opportunity to be here yet, but I'm really appreciative of the welcome so far and of this beautiful space, and also the beautiful readings, and just the general spirit here. I really appreciate it. So I am a Lutheran pastor by background. As Reverend Christopher said, I am Pastor Beth Burkholtz, and I work for Samaritas as the Director of Congregational Engagement. And what that means, no one ever gets my title right, and it's fine. What that means is that I help congregations to connect to the mission that they might be feeling called to, and especially if there is a service around them that's already happening through Samaritas, that they can connect with that local mission that's happening. And you all have already done that. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I wanted to tell you who I am and who Samaritas is. And so I am married to another pastor. We live in Plymouth, which is on the east side, so halfway between Ann Arbor and Detroit. It's a great town with a lot of trains. And I was a pastor in a congregation, in several congregations for years, before following my call to do this work of helping churches to connect to social services, and doing kind of that justice work in that way. I have 2 children, and I'm telling you that because one of them will figure in what I'm going to say in a bit. They are 19, one in college, and 16, one in high school. And they are delightful teenagers, and I'm not kidding. So Samaritas, just to give you a rundown, if you don't know kind of the nutshell of what Samaritas is, we are formerly Lutheran Social Services of Michigan. And the way that I find it the best to understand is that we're divided into two divisions, child and family, and then senior living. And that's the majority of what we do. So child and family is things like foster care, adoption, refugee resettlement, refugee foster care, and homes for children that are aging out of foster care with life skills and things like that. Senior living is, we have several senior living facilities all over Michigan, including one here in Grand Rapids, the Lodge, and the Woods. It's pretty large. And then we also have affordable living communities. We have about 17 all across Michigan. And so those are communities mostly for seniors, but some for families that have rent on a sliding scale from 0 up to kind of market rate. So those are really cool communities because affordable housing is such a huge need and such a justice issue. We are leaning into affordable living and creating those communities, and I'm really proud of that. And of course, as I said, the Refugee Foster Care Program, which you have supported here at Fountain Street for some years. Refugee foster care is children that come to the United States as unaccompanied minors or as refugees. They are either fleeing a situation which is terrible or getting out of a situation which became untenable, whether or not their country is at war. So those stories, as you can imagine, can be they can be heartbreaking, they can be difficult to hear, but they also can be very joyful. And so in your building, you house a school for refugee foster care clients. And also there is a gallery of art that is created by our refugee youth. And that's a program that we've done for several years. The gallery is here right now, which thank you for housing it. And it tells some of the stories of those refugee youth and unaccompanied minors. One of the stories that is not featured here because the youth were not, they were not ready to tell their story through art. And I'll just give you the highlights of their story, which is not atypical. There are 3 brothers who came from the Congo. And they made their way across the ocean. They kind of stowed away on a ship. You can still do that. And they made their way to South America, to Brazil. They stayed in a refugee camp in Brazil for about a year. They learned to speak Portuguese, adding that to their other 3 languages that they already spoke. And the reason why they had fled is because they arrived home one day and their house was on fire. Literally on fire. And so they fled. They made it to South America, to Brazil, and then they walked from Brazil all the way up through Central America and across the border into Texas. So when they made it to Texas, one of the brothers was over 18, and he was put in the detention center in Texas. And the other 2 brothers, who were minors, came into our care. Those 2 brothers came to live with a friend of mine who is a pastor nearby, and she opened her home to them. And for the first few weeks, she didn't know that they had a brother. They spoke a lot of languages, but English was not one of them. And once they found out that maybe she could help them find their brother, this was a long and involved story, but the congregation which she served came together to provide legal counsel, about $5,000 or $6,000 to go to Texas, get the brother out of detention, and bring him back and reunite him with those 3 brothers. So this is a story that you could, it's hard to imagine. You could write a novel about it. You could make a documentary about it, about the story of these 3 brothers. This is a pretty typical story of our refugee youth. And so the support that you give is helping them with trauma care and helping them to find a safe place, because that is vitally important for them, as you can imagine. So this story, for me, answers a big question that I like to think about, and it's kind of a businessy question, and so I apologize for that, but it's, what is our why? You've probably heard that if you're in any kind of corporation. It flies around, what is our why? And sometimes when I would hear that, I would tune out because I really hate all the corporate speak. But I really was thinking about it, and what is our why is a really good question to ask. And it's a really good question to keep asking. And it's this story of these refugees being reunited is part of our why at Samaritas. It's part of my personal why. And it's that welcoming the stranger and loving our neighbor is part of the work that we're called to do in the world. That's our why. One of our supporting congregations is a Jewish temple. And a few weeks ago, they've been so wonderful to work with. And a few weeks ago, they emailed me and said, we want you to come and speak, which, awesome. And they said, we want you to know this work that we're doing with Samaritas, it is not charity. It is part of their tikkun olam, the repair of the world. This is a foundational Jewish tenet. The repair of the world is the work that they are engaged in. And I thought that was so beautiful, and please excuse my Hebrew, I'm much better at Greek. But the repair of the world, the tikkun olam, is their why, and it's part of our why as well, to participate in this repair of the world. So I told you I was going to mention my son, my children, and so I have a son, and since they were tiny, we have asked their permission because they are part of a two-pastor household. They are double PKs. They are part of a very small club, and so double PKs, they get together, they have a text chain, they talk about their parents. We have asked their permission since they were tiny, can I talk about you in my sermon? And if they say, no, I'd rather you not, we absolutely will not. I grew up always being uncomfortable with pastors sharing these stories about their spouses and children. So I decided I would always ask their permission. So I asked my son, Jonathan, he is 16, can I share this comment that you made? And he said, yes, please share it, but only if you include, and this is how he directed me to write this down, my esteemed truth-seeking son, Jonathan. I'm not kidding, who is 16. And he said, please tell them, I brilliantly pointed out. Right, okay, so there you go. He brilliantly pointed out that he noticed that all the world's religions have some version of what Christians call the Golden Rule. You heard that this morning. You heard that illustrated brilliantly. That all the world's religions have this, this golden rule, this foundational principle. Love your neighbor as yourself. Whatever you would wish for yourself, that is how you act with your neighbor. So my esteemed truth-seeking son, Jonathan, who is a deep thinker, pointed that out a few weeks ago. He's studying world religions in high school, and I said, that's exactly right, beautifully illustrated. That's part of our why, isn't it? That all the world's religions ask us to love our neighbor as ourselves. It's foundational, and it's so difficult, isn't it? And so that leads us to the story of the Good Samaritan, which is how Samaritas got our name and our why. Just a little refresher course on this story from the New Testament. A man was walking down the road, and was attacked and robbed and left in a ditch. 2 different denominations of priests walk right by and don't help. But a Samaritan, those who Jesus' people thought were wrong religiously, absolutely wrong, and really even hated, he was the one that helped this man. Jesus ends by saying, "And who is my neighbor?" Then, if this Samaritan helps you, who is my neighbor? So Samaritas got our name from the Latin translation of the Latin word of the act of being a Samaritan, Samaritas. That's how we live. The act of loving our neighbor is Samaritas. Our why is helping our neighbor, whomever they may be, whatever they believe, whatever they don't believe, whomever they are. It's simple, but also maybe the hardest thing to put into practice. As Lutherans, we have a weird Lutheran question that the Catechism asks, and if anyone else grew up Lutheran, you may have remembered this Catechism question, what does this mean for us? It's kind of like, what's your why? But it's a question I want to pose to you today. What does this mean for us? You here at Fountain Street have already answered that question in many ways, and you've answered it really well. This means for you that you've opened your building to house a school for refugee youth. It means that you have welcomed people who have many beliefs and no beliefs and who don't know what they believe yet into this place. It means that you are welcoming a refugee family into your midst to learn and grow with that family, as well as providing some support along the way. And what that means is that you are willing to welcome the stranger, your neighbor, whomever they may be. And so I want to encourage you to keep asking these vital questions because they're all related. They're all part of what we do here in the world. What is your why? What does this mean for us? And maybe most importantly, who is my neighbor? Thank you for doing this good and important work, and thank you for partnering with Samaritas in that work. As our Jewish siblings say, it is the repair of the world, and it's that work that we can only do together. I ask for peace and for blessings for all of you. Thank you for having me.
Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. I used to start every offering invitation with something like that, and I would say that all of the great traditions of the world call us towards love, and that the offering is an embodiment of that. And we're not to the offering yet, but love your neighbor as yourself. I think it feels like one of the most overlooked, if not ignored, realities in our world right now. Love your neighbor. What is going on in Eastern Europe, or Sub-Saharan Africa, or the Middle East, or our southern states, or the realities in our own city's core, or even our actual neighborhoods? I've struggled with this rule because I think we live in a world that doesn't always love itself. So if we're to love our neighbor as ourselves, that's hard when we don't always live in a place that the message is to love yourself fully for who you are. But that's precisely what we do here in that repair work. Yes, we focus on the issues of refugee resettlement or the crisis, or we focus on praying for peace in Ukraine. We focus on racial injustice and LGBTQ inclusion, but we also focus on loving ourselves, and that also starts here. And so when I remind you every week before our time of prayer with one another that you have nowhere else to be right now, that's not just an invitation, that's a bit of a command, because you too deserve and need to be practicing loving yourself in this shared space of prayer. So I'll say it again. You have nowhere to be but here right now. So find a comfortable spot for just a moment. Allow yourself to be present in this cathedral of love and loving yourself so that you can love your neighbor. And take a breath with me for just a moment. Breathe in. And release. And practice loving yourself through this prayer. Will you please pray with me? Spirit of love and spirit of peacemaking that time nor space can contain, gathered in this historic and sacred and beloved cathedral of love and temple for peace, we collectively give thanks for the blessings of our global community, our neighbors, and our one wild, precious life. As we seek to love ourselves so that we might love and better love our neighbor. Help us in our resolve as we share in one common and universal dream, a world in which homes and schools and children thrive, a world in which neighborhoods are safe and loving, a world in which cities are rich in colors and cultures. A world in which every economy is a safe space where no one is exploited or excluded. A world in which the rich and the poor and everyone in between have access to the opportunity for a dignified and affirming life. A world in which churches and mosques and synagogues and temples and classrooms and living rooms share the deepest desire to be of service to a hurting world and a healing balm to their neighbors. the presence of our own neighbors, and in the presence of the Spirit of love, we recognize that we come into this temple with a mix of realities: pain, loss, love, hope, joy, confusion, despair, faith. And we hold each and every one of those burdens and their joys for exactly what they are: the very things that make us fully human and fully whole. Help us to remember to lay them down with our neighbors in lament. Help us to remember to lift them up with our neighbors in celebration. In spirit of love, once again, help us to love ourselves so that we might truly, one day, love our neighbor fully, authentically, in a peacemaking kind of way. May it be so. Amen. Thank you again, Sharon. Wow. Before our collected offering, we are going to have some words from one of our very involved and committed volunteers as it relates to Samaritas, Kirsten Lundeen, who has been working on our Afghan family project here at Fountain Street Church. I'm sure she could give us a lot more information than I allowed her space for, and so I promised her that I would also invite people to see her and the team outside down by the Keeler Lounge if you have other questions or any other things you'd like to talk with her about as it relates to this project.
Again, my name is Kirsten Lundeen, and welcome this morning. Thank you, Reverend Beth, for your words and background about Samaritas, and Sharon for your passion for your art and for your piano. It's impressive and inspiring. Thank you. In past surveys and recently in the listening circles identified that Fountain Street Church should be more involved in community activities. In reality, many of our congregation are involved actively each month in community projects such as the Habitat for Humanity building projects, the Build Guild working with Family Promise to rehabilitate trailers for homes for needy families, And we have a group of Fountain Street Green Team that is collaborating with client agencies in the area to address environmental issues. And then we have a new broad-based community organizing initiative called Together West Michigan. Additionally, many of our individual members are tutoring kids in schools across the county. Now, Fountain Street Church, as Reverend Beth has mentioned, is involved in two intensive Samaritas programs. One is which in the education program for unaccompanied teen refugees, which involves a lot of Afghani refugees, which was initiated 2 years ago, and it meets daily on our 3rd and 4th floors. And secondly, the new faith-based co-sponsorship of Afghan refugee families, which we are involved in. Samaritas and Bethany, two of the largest NGOs in West Michigan, have historically received federal funds to support the resettlement of immigrants coming into our communities. This year, with the sudden exodus of the U.S. Involvement in Afghani, and thus creating a huge refugee exit from the country, the Congress has approved an emergency humanitarian parolee program specifically for the Afghan refugee. This program provides emergency or transitionary settlement needs for the Afghani refugees who were exited, and they were approved for exit if they had worked for the U.S. military or involved with a NATO or with the government which was U.S. supported in Afghanistan. Federally requirements for this humanitarian parolee program are to provide benefits for an initial period of 6 months for housing, food and groceries, bus passes, access to English classes, enrollment in public school systems, and a wide variety of health services. After 6 months, the Afghan family adults are expected to find jobs and fully support themselves financially. We, Fountain Street Church, as a faith-based co-sponsor, are responsible for the oversight of the family to see that these federal requirements take place and are followed through on. In mid-December of last year, we received a family of 8, a single mother with 3 elementary-age children, a teen nephew, and her brother, wife, and young child. I would like to describe the journey that our family traveled after they left Kabul in August. The family attempted 5 difficult trips to the Kabul airport to gain access for plane seats through the terrible crowds and the military screeners. Once in the plane, they were initially flown to Qatar, where they were housed in tents on a U.S. base for 2 weeks. Then on to Germany and settled at a U.S. base on the blacktop in tents for 1.5 months. Then on to Virginia to a U.S. military base for 2 months. Then on flying through Chicago to Grand Rapids. Upon entry in Grand Rapids in December, with minimal rental houses available for them, they were housed at the Hawthorne Residence Suites for 45 days before being assigned to their new home. They were gone from Kabul or from Afghanistan up to 4.5 months before they arrived in Grand Rapids. They came exhausted, with only 1 bag and a handful of formal documents for identification. Our project, our faith-based project for the Afghan refugees, has a team of 20 volunteers who, to date, have found a rental home, furnished the home, moved the family into their East Town home, bought needed winter clothing, assisted with ongoing grocery shopping, organizing English classes at their home, and coordinating the children's school enrollment. And we are now assisting in job searching. And then we have a large part of our program is coordinating the many and required health visits for immunizations and primary health care, dental care, and special referral visits. And also we coordinate getting their Social Security cards, their driver's license, and coordinating legal immigrant screening requirements. Our volunteers to date have contributed approximately 500 hours since December. And at this time, we provide an average of 25 hours a week of volunteer time to serve the family and coordinate administrative activities with Samaritas. I would like all our volunteers to stand, whether you're in the front or in the choir. Penny, I want you to stand too out there. I would like to introduce the volunteers who are involved in the project so that our congregation knows the amount of effort that they have taken to meet these requirements for our families. Dale Eman, who is administrative lead team member. Dale, raise your hands. And Deb Robinson, who is our health coordinator, and she's on our lead team. Penny Barstow, who she and I worked together initially to find rental homes, which was a challenge. Deb Pebley, who is not here today, and she's a health advocate. Kavern Lehman, who is a health advocate. Joan LaFranca, she is not here. She is an English lessons, she provides English lessons on site at the home, along with Denise Joseph, who provide English classes on home. Caitlin Mills is not here, but she's been involved as a tech support to help us keep our computer information clean and in case management. Gretchen Zeiderveen, who has coordinating, where is Gretchen? Coordinating school enrollment for the families. Cindy Camp and Shelley Jeffries, who have provided excursions out into the community and will continue to do that. Penny Schindler and Pat Burke, who give special assistance to our lead team when we want that. And then lastly, but very importantly, Tony Cruz, Lance Penny, Don and Christy Pebley, and her husband Matt, who have helped us move. The Fountain Street Church community has been very generous with the provision of furniture, household items from all of you people, books, computer equipment, and needed financial contributions to receive and settle this family. We will continue to need volunteers plus financial support through the end of 2022. Our Afghan team of volunteers thanks you, the congregation, for generous support. Can we give a hand to our... Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten, and thank you again to the team. And if you want to make connections with them, they will be down by the Keeler after worship. And there is also just an extended invitation to all of you that the Keeler has this beautiful and moving installation of artwork done by these refugee foster children. And so you are encouraged to check that out after worship. As I noted earlier and last week, we have begun the physical collection of the offering again here at Fountain Street Church. And as is often the tradition, sometimes we'll designate it for different things. And this week, we are going to be making sure that it lines up with what we've been talking about and lifting up today, which is Samaritas and this refugee work. The specific designated part of the collection this week will be going to refugee foster care. That's the actual proper name of it. It sounded a little vague, so I wanted to make sure, but it's to continue to support these programs. And these are very moving programs for anyone who's ever here during the week to see these students and these boys. And we had a moment shared about a month ago. Kirsten was here for this, where one of the nephew was in the building with Kirsten, and as he was coming in from our foster family we've been working with, the boys were going out, and he recognized somebody from Kabul that was on a soccer team with him. So it was just powerful moment it was surreal. And so this is a real, living, tangible, important program that we want to lift up here. So please give generously, and with that spirit of love and loving our neighbor, even the neighbors we don't know and will never know, the offering will now be graciously collected. Thank you so much, choir. We just have a few announcements today as we end our time with one another. You might have noticed some paper chains lying around. You might have seen a teaser banner over here in our church colors. We are going to be embarking on a bit of an artistic and creative journey together, and this was brought about by the listening circles, which Kirsten Lundeen actually brought up earlier. As you might recall, there was a series of listening circles that were offered in the whole month of October, where it was a chance for people to share their hopes and dreams for the church, and then the communications committee of our governing board took that information and they collated it, and they tried to find some themes, which there were some pretty strong themes. And one of those themes was simply the reality, like anywhere else in the world, that there's a lot of mourning going on, mourning. And so there was a very organic and grassroots effort from the communications committee, as well as some creative volunteers, to come up with a way that we can at least collectively lament together, as we've talked about for a few weeks, and physically write those down. And so you're going to see all over the building for quite a while these strips of paper where you could name a burden you're carrying, or you could name a grief that you're holding on to, or you could name a loss. The idea is that it's somewhat anonymous. You don't need to sign it and put your address and phone number. It's just something you can share physically. But it doesn't have to be just about Fountain Street, because as we know, we are so much more complex than just this 1 hour every week, though it is a profound hour. It is very likely that you will want to let go of grief or loss or lay down a lament about what's happening in Ukraine. That is deeply disturbing. It's very likely that you will have experienced a personal loss of physical health or the physical health of a loved one in your life. It's very likely that you are grieving things that you don't even know what they are yet, but you know it's packed down in there somewhere. And so this is just a season of being able to do that in a beautiful way. And they will create these chains, these beautiful chains. And I think the rest is a surprise, or at least it is to me. So I'm just sharing this on behalf of the group that's doing it. So there you have it. I hope you'll take advantage of this. These strips will be distributed to the choir. They'll be distributed to the kayak club, and they'll be distributed to almost every group, religious services committee, governing board, parent circle, you name it. And we're going to really try to do this with intention. And if you have any questions, I see Renee is out there. I see Kristen's out there. I see all kinds of faces that would be happy to help you. So I'm hopeful though, Meredith, I believe, has been involved with this. Find one of them and ask them about it, and please participate fully. It's a little early, but I want to put on your calendars Good Friday, which is the Friday before Easter, which is Friday, well, Easter is on the 17th, so that would be Friday the 15th sounds right. We're going to have a space, a service, a time together here in the church at 7 o'clock that evening, and I wouldn't normally promote it that early, but I decided this morning that I think it's time that we try to safely create music and sing with one another. And so it will be a service of singing and hope and healing. And I also hold that with a lot of the weight and tension that might be a little scary for some of you who aren't ready to do that. And so we will be working to make it fully inclusive and fully transparent in what we're going to do, so you can decide if you want to watch it from home or if you want to come here and sing together. There'll be more information, but I think it is important for me to put that out there because I think it is it's good to take some time to see how you feel about it, both for making the choice for yourself as well as reaching out to me if you have any ideas or concerns about that. So Good Friday will be one of the first times where we can collectively come together and sing in this space. So just hold that on your heart and think about it. Wow, we had a rich service today, and I know we've gone a little long, so I don't want to keep you any longer, but I do want to make sure that we thank everybody appropriately. So thank you again to Reverend Beth for being here today. That was so special. Thank you to Jonathan Took on the organ as always. Thank you, Sharon. Oh my goodness, I didn't know the piano could make those sounds. Thank you to Margie for accompanying our choir, for Austin, for John, and for each of you who have come and called this place your spiritual home. Thank you. As we go forward from this space this week, I invite you to continue to practice loving yourself because the world needs you to love them too. And so go in peace to make peace, love yourself, and love your neighbor. I love you. Thank you for being here again this week.